Hello. Today we're going to talk about organizational behavior, and this is one of the major topics in management in general. So we obviously are not going to cover a lot. We'll only scratch the surface. But the idea is that that's the opportunity for you to learn a little bit about it. And if you have any interest in learning more about what it entails, I am here for you. I can share resources. I can provide some information. So I'd be happy to help in any way I can. Let me pull up my slides. So basically, we have quite a few things to cover. We're going to start with the definitions, and then we'll talk about personalities and the types of personalities, perceptions and attitudes, because they are absolutely essential to making sense of behavior, individual behavior and organizational behavior. And we'll also talk about politics, organizational politics and power, and what you can do to attain power and how you use it to your advantage and to make sure that your organization achieves its goals. So we're going to start with the definition of organizational behavior. And in the most general sense, when we talk about behavior, we talk about actions, right? Individual actions. So organizational behavior is the study of actions that affect performance in the workplace. There are many things that contribute to why individuals behave a certain way. Things like your thoughts, self-confidence, self-esteem, personality, perception, and attitudes, and all of them are essential. So we're going to start with thoughts. And the power of thoughts is that generally, whether you can or cannot do something is determined by your beliefs, right? By whether or not you trust yourself to do it. So I'm a proud father of many kids, and I just know in raising them, the most important thing to help them achieve something is to make them believe they can do it. If they believe they can do it, they will do what it takes and they will do it joyfully. So your thoughts are absolutely essential. Optimism versus pessimism. Well, obviously, optimism is it's something that makes you a lot more willing to try things out. Something that lets you stay positive, even if things don't work out the way you hope. And it's kind of the opposite of self-doubt, right? So if you're optimistic and things don't work out the way you hope, you do not necessarily attribute the problem to yourself, right? You know that you just gonna try one more time and things will work out. And the other thing that is essential in your organizational life is the importance of gratitude. And things happen throughout your life, and obviously, it's a good idea to try to identify the positives rather than concentrate on the negatives at all times. And if you actually appreciate the good things that happen to you, it gives you the power, it gives you the strength to overcome whatever challenges come. So, you know, um, try to not be pessimistic, try to see things in a positive way. Even this COVID-19 crisis and all the changes that it has introduced into our education process, um, there are still a lot of things to be grateful for. So all the internet environment that we have and ability to continue our education, yes, it's not the same. We don't really have that same kind of interaction, but it enables us to still continue do what we do. And these video lectures, if nothing else, you have a chance to go back and re-listen, revisit some of the things that you may have missed during our regular in-class presentations. So if you adopt this right attitude and if you approach the situation with gratitude, you're more likely to do well. So that's just one of the instances where the importance of gratitude could be easily understood. Self-confidence and self-esteem are also very important concepts that explain our behavior. Basically, self-confidence, also sometimes referred as self-efficacy or self-concept, is the attitude that results in your "I can do this" belief, right? So again, raising kids, my goal is to make them believe that they're capable of achieving whatever they try. And if they do that, if they believe in themselves, they're going to succeed. So self-confidence obviously is the opposite of self-doubt. You don't want to concentrate on your potential shortcomings. So basically, again, the idea is that you want to believe in yourself. So it's the overall view of oneself. And we all have periods when we do have doubts and self-doubts as well. It turns out you can actually improve your self-confidence and self-esteem by trying to visualize your success, by engaging in positive, optimistic self-talk. I know it sounds a little bit, touchy-feely, but I've done that when I had my share of trouble, and there were people around that didn't believe in my future success. I didn't allow that to really bring me down. I never gave up, and I was able to overcome the challenges that I was facing. So you can actually talk yourself into believing into brighter future, and if nothing else, it makes your life a lot more pleasant than could be the case otherwise. And looking at the individual as a whole, we I guess casually we all understand the importance of personality. But we know that some people are easier to be around than others. Some people bring with them a lot of not just expertise, but good spirit to whatever tasks the organization faces. So personality is this combination of behavioral, mental, and emotional traits that define the individual, right? So it's not just your skills, it's the behavior, it's your mental attitudes, and it's your emotions. And there are many traits that could potentially be important in describing the individual. Some of the most important ones are optimism as opposed to pessimism, locus of control. So that's a very important psychological concept that actually explains a lot of behaviors of individuals and the organizational results. Basically, individuals are believed to have either internal locus of control or external locus of control. People with internal locus of control believe that everything is pretty much up to them, right? They initiate the change. They know what they want. They do what needs to be done, and that's that. People with external locus of control, on the other hand, they have just life happening to them. They always respond to whatever changes happen from in the external environment. So they find themselves, I don't want to say in a victim position necessarily, but they are far less proactive. They always react. People take different amount of risks when living their lives, including their organizational lives. So risk propensity is an important dimension of your personality. And then the other thing is Machiavellianism. So you probably have heard about Machiavelli, and he is primarily known for this belief that the end justifies the means. So people are, they're likely to try to manipulate the situation to a different extent. And some people believe that as long as the goal justifies, different behavioral strategies, almost anything goes. So, that's the dimension that describes your willingness to manipulate others using whatever means necessary. There are different behavioral types, and some of them can be found among entrepreneurs, definitely. So, we focus here on entrepreneurs because these are the people who start other businesses, start companies, and we tend to believe that there is this one entrepreneurial personality, right? If you believe popular media, you have this go-getter person who overcomes all the challenges, sort of the hero type. And that's not necessarily the case, right? And as many of you may consider entrepreneurial careers, don't let your personality, your self, I guess, perception stop you from pursuing your dreams, your ideas, if you're not one of those kind of individuals. And so go-getters are just one kind of individuals who have been successful and started their companies, but there are also people like innovators who are, who just come up with new ways of doing things and bring those to the market. There are people who are compared to machines, right? Those efficient people who follow the processes, people like Bill Gates. Um, he's not a heroic type by any means, right? But he is very efficient at what he does. And definitely those kind of people have built very successful business empires for themselves. There are people we compare to prodigies, right? People like Elon Musk, who are not necessarily outgoing socially individuals, but they have this idea for a potentially disruptive product or process, and they go about that. And then we have people like Mark Zuckerberg, the visionaries who try to redefine the way we live our lives, who have an alternative vision for the future, who change the way we interact and we go about our lives. So again, you look at Mark Zuckerberg, he's by no means this go-getter that the media portrays a typical entrepreneur, but most of us would agree that he is very successful at what he does. In a general sense, however, as we try to describe different dimensions of personality, uh, there's this thing called the Big Five personality dimensions, and they are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So they describe things like openness to new experiences. Um, People may welcome them, or they may be intimidated by the novelty. And it does not necessarily stay the same over your lifetime. I think as we're young, most of us are sort of more open to new experiences. And then as we get older, we start being very careful and cautious. Conscientiousness is the extent to which others may effectively rely on you, right? If you say you're going to do something, you're going to try your best to do it. So people who are conscientious, you definitely want to have them in an organization because you may trust them. You can delegate to them some important task and believe that they will do everything they can to get it done. So obviously it has to go hand in hand with skills that the individual has, but this is a very important dimension of personality that will determine whether or not the individual will be successful and the organization, the extent to which the organization may rely on that individual. Extroversion, introversion, again, something we have discussed before. Agreeableness is sort of the extent to which an individual is likely to go along with others. And so we all may have different ideas for how things should be done, but the extent to which we are likely to fight for our way would be very different across individuals, right? So agreeableness, you definitely want to be around people who do not necessarily challenge everything that you propose. Now, there's a downside to it, obviously, right? So if your proposal is not good, you want to be challenged. But generally, I think if you're qualified to make decisions that your organization requires, you want to have people who do not necessarily challenge you on everything and try to pull the organization in different directions. So that is essential. A particularly powerful way of classifying personalities is the so-called Myers-Briggs type indicators. So here we talk about four dimensions where individuals can vary, if you will. Again, there's a lot of similarity with what we discussed before. It starts again with the focus of your attention, whether or not you're extrovert or an introvert. The next one is how you take in the information, whether it has to make sense, right? Or if you rely on your intuition when assessing the information. How you make your decisions. If you think about it or you rely on your feelings, and how you prefer to organize your life, judging or perceiving. So, we have four possible dimensions, I guess two levels at each. That results in 16 possible personality types. And I will share with you some online resources that will allow you to assess where you fit in along these kind of dimensions. It will help you understand your strengths and weaknesses. And I believe one of the self assessments for this week deals directly with Myers-Briggs assessment. So I definitely encourage you to take it seriously, and that could be influential for you to plan your future, right? So it will show you your strengths and weaknesses. It will show you some individuals who have had those same personality as you do in the past throughout our history, and could possibly indicate the fields where you're more or less likely to be successful. Um, the truth of our life is that we all perceive reality, right? So we all interpret reality, and no two individuals have the same perception of those same events. There are many reasons for why that happens. We all have our biases and we have our distinct histories. So when we see the same situation, what we take out of it could be very different for different individuals in a company. So perception becomes essential because we act based on our perceptions, and obviously the organizational effectiveness or performance depends on our actions and our behaviors. So for that reason, understanding your perception, understanding how we process the information, how we select the information to respond to is essential. And one thing that is connected to our perception is this notion of attribution. A big part of what we do is we try to make sense of the behavior of other people. And specifically, every time we observe someone do something strange, right, or something that doesn't make sense to us, we try to figure out whether they simply respond to the situation, whether it's a matter of their choice, right, their conscious, intentional behavior. So this attribution process works like that. We observe the behavior, we try to determine the reason for that behavior, and then depend on whether or not this behavior is situational or intentional, our behavioral response will be different. So it makes a lot of sense to try to figure out, why people do what they do, but also to understand our own perceptions because they will affect our judgment, our determination of the reason for other people's behaviors, and that will have implications for what happens um, in the organization and in your relation with those other individuals. We all have biases in our perception. A big chunk of it comes from selectivity. We tend to select those aspects of events that happen around us that sort of back us up, right? That confirm our beliefs about the world. We all tend to attribute higher weight to our importance, right? So I told you, right, that in the past, one of the parts of my job is doing research, and that results in writing scientific articles. And typically, I work with other people because that is a far better way of getting new ideas and getting things done fast. If you ask, so let's say we have three co-authors on the paper, you ask them how much they have contributed to the success of the paper, most people would identify their contribution at like 50% or more. Obviously, you have three individuals, you combine those perceived contributions, they add up to more than 100%. And that's because selectively we choose to value our own contribution much higher than we would have had we had a complete information. We choose to filter certain things out. Frame of reference is absolutely essential as well. So looking at different behaviors, looking at different events, our view of the situation will be informed by our histories. And this is why where we come from is absolutely essential. And this is why this educational experience you get while at the university helps you sort of develop a frame of reference and enable you to see things, better see things for what they really are. So be more objective in your interaction with the world. We all are subject to stereotyping. So, you see an individual and you judge that individual before you actually know what he or she is about, right? Based on race or your perceived education level of that person, national origin, gender, things like that. They do affect what we think of others and bias our perceptions. Expectations, right? So we have different expectations of others. They have expectations of us. Those rarely match, and they introduce biases in what we do and how we act. Then finally, the like me assumption. I guess none of us question our own perceptions much. So most of us believe that others should be thinking like us, acting like us, should be behaving in manner that is consistent with how we perceive, how we see the world. And that's a big mistake because, again, as I said, no two individuals perceive those same events in the same manner, truly. We do develop certain attitudes as we interact with other people, and they stem from our positive or negative evaluations of people, things, and situations. They are based on our perceptions, and this is why they are deeply subjective. Um, there are internal and external factors that affect our attitudes, but the important thing is that attitudes affect behavior, job satisfaction, performance, and what's more important, attitudes that we develop over time, they turn into this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we believe that we can do stuff, we will try our best to do it. If others believe we can do stuff, we will feel more empowered to actually, conquer different challenges that life throws our way. And attitudes are generally contagious. So you believe earlier in the semester, I gave you this example of the Japanese company where people were manually testing all the cables to make sure that they only ship, the good ones. So had it not been for the management with their attitudes of we can do that, that this is important for the organization, had they not displayed their commitment to resolving the situation to others, people probably would have left, right? But because those attitudes are contagious, they were able to create this organizational culture that made it possible. You've all probably been in situations where people are, yeah, think about sports teams. When people are optimistic, when people are upbeat, it's a lot of fun being around them, right? So you actually adopt that same behavioral, emotional, mental response to stimuli that those people have. At the same time, if you join a group of people where everybody is down, where people are pessimistic, after a while, you're probably gonna adopt the same outlook on life, right? So that could be a problem, but it could also be a blessing, depending on what kind of group you join. And finally, it turns out that what managers think of individual employees is critically important as well, right? So there is this so-called Pygmalion effect. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The difference is here, managers' expectations of your performance determine how you would perform, right? So it's not your beliefs, it's the manager beliefs, because you will be put in a situation where you'll have the opportunity to practice your skills where others believe or do not believe in you. So what the manager thinks matters. And this is why, all the empowerment and transformational leadership is so important because it allows the people to reach their capacity for real. At the end of the day, those personality types affect how much power you have in an organization. And by power, I mean your ability to influence others' behavior. So you remember, right, we talked about power and authority and how they're not necessarily the same thing. So again, power is your ability to influence others. And politics, organizational politics, is the process of gaining and using power in organizations. Power can come from different sources, so to speak. Again, some power is simply attributed to the position, right? In which case you have the ability to coerce people to do certain things just because you put in this position of power. On the other end of this continuum, you have personal power, right? Maybe because you're an expert in a certain area, you have key information, you have the knowledge, you can give people advice, and they will treat you very differently, right? They will treat you with respect. They will listen to you, and they will modify their behavior accordingly based on the input you provide. So that's sort of position power and personal power. And generally, the behavior people engage in to attain power is known as political behavior. There are three components to it: networking, reciprocity, and coalition building. So, reciprocity is, I guess, a very simple idea. As individuals, we may have power in different domains. I can help you with this, you can help me with that. So basically, we're doing each other favors, and through that, we would get what we want. So that's the kind of political behavior. Networking is something that goes beyond just two individuals. So you try to build this network of people who can help each other out. Obviously, you want to be at the central position within that network, and that's that. And finally, coalition building is something that is um, probably somewhat more focused on reaching a specific goal, right? Networking is there to stay for the time being. With coalition building, you may just rally the troops to get a certain thing done. When imagine there is a election process. It doesn't have to be political election, but you know, maybe the university, the new department chair elections. So obviously, each of the individuals interested in a position will try to talk to others to build a coalition to get to that position that he or she desires. Once the goal is reached or not reached, right? Once someone occupies this position of power, that's really it, right? The reason for the coalition existence is no longer there, so it may dissipate, and that's an important distinction with networking. Obviously, if you have a lot of power in an organization, you can just tell others what to do. Uh, but more often than not, you'll be faced with situation where your personal power or the position power will not be sufficient for you to get what you want from others. So you have to engage in the negotiation process. You have to try to align your goals with goals of others to shape their behavior a certain way. And the negotiation is a kind of a complex process, which really starts with planning the negotiation, right? You try to research the other party, trying to figure out what's important to them, what what you can do that they would want of you, and there you set objectives, you try to develop different strategies, anticipate questions, anticipate objections, prepare answers, do things of that nature. Then you start the negotiation process itself, right? You develop rapport. You never start asking what you need right away. You've got to engage in some preliminary dancing, if you will, right? So you develop rapport with the person. You try to focus on obstacles. You never criticize the person. So you try to create this shared understanding of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Um, and then you always try to let the other party make the first offer, right? So that puts you in a much better position. It reveals a lot of information. It allows you to withhold the key information that obviously the other party would want to have prior to making that first offer. So there's a lot of back and forth in the negotiation process, and I guess you want to do it very, very carefully. And at some point, it may become apparent that you cannot actually reach any sort of agreement, right? That the negotiation is not leading anywhere. So, rather than, or maybe that you have to give up too much at this point. So, even if you're going to get the result you want, the price you're going to pay will be too high. So, you may actually try to postpone the resolution of whatever conflict you're trying to deal with. If that's not possible, there's only two outcomes for the negotiation process. You either reach some agreement or you don't. And if you don't, then, obviously you have to think of other strategies. But again, right, so when the power is insufficient to just demand things your way, you've got to engage in negotiation. And oftentimes those situations do result in conflicts. They typically arise because we fail to make our expectation clear and we fail to learn about the expectations of others. And then we're just surprised that people do not see eye to eye. We tend to assume that others have the same expectations as us and they assume the same of us. So there's usually a big surprise when people realize that they expect different things, and trying to resolve those situations, those conflicts, could become quite tricky. There are two types of conflicts in general: functional and dysfunctional. Functional conflicts are conflicts of ideas, right? If you work for a company, you try to decide which market to enter, you may argue, whether to go to Europe or to Asia first, right? That would be an example of a functional conflict of ideas. And as you brainstorm it, as you try to resolve it, it's actually a good thing for the organization. A dysfunctional conflict is a personal conflict, right? So here, the conflict exists not because you disagree on what the organization is about to do, but because you don't like the person who maybe suggested the ideas, or who you're working with, or who you will be working if certain action is to be taken, right? So those conflicts are not helpful to the organization in the slightest, and those you want to try to avoid as much as possible. There are five basic conflict management styles, and sometimes it's seen as a zero-sum game, right? So if I win, you lose, I win. It's not necessarily like that at all, right? So you may have high concern for others or low concern, and high concern for self, for your own needs, or low. So as with anything in management, it gives us an opportunity to prepare a very simple 2 by 2 matrix. Um, that displays four main conflict resolution styles and then one that's kind of in the middle. So you may try to avoid the conflict altogether, right? And if you avoid the conflict, then you definitely lose, but then the other party may lose as well. So that's probably the worst possible situation because the issue remains unresolved. You may try to approach it with force. The idea here is sort of aggressive behavior. The idea here is that you lose and I win, right? So that's where this whole zero-sum game comes into play. You may try to accommodate the other party, sort of you win, I lose. Definitely not the best option either. And then you may have a collaborative conflict style. So assertive behavior, you win, I win. So that's definitely the best. It's pretty hard to do, but it's possible. And then finally, in the middle, there is this negotiating conflict style, meaning you win some, I win some, right? So everybody gets something out of resolving the conflict, but it's definitely not as productive as a collaborating conflict style. right? So depending on the kind of situation you're in and how much power you have within the organization, you may tailor your response by adopting one of these conflict management styles and try to get at least something out of this conflict, the problematic situation. There are different responsibilities that you will have as an initiator or responder to the collaborative conflict resolution. I will probably ask you to read about it in a textbook, so it explains it pretty well. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit more is that oftentimes those differences in personalities and differences in our attitudes and the conflicts that we face cause certain amount of stress for us. And we tend to think about stress as a uniformly negative thing. That's not actually the case. It turns out, and research shows that quite clearly, that there is an optimal level of stress in an organization that allows you and the organization to maximize their performance. And so it's called the stress. So the idea here is that some pressure is better than no pressure at all. Too much pressure is obviously bad. So you've got to figure out what the level of stress that allows you to maximize your performance and strive to maintain your professional life with that amount of stress, right? Particularly when you're young, right? So we're not really talking about retirement here just yet. But if you want to grow professionally, you've got to have some professional stress as well. So there may be different reasons for you to experience it, personality types, organizational culture, change, right? So anytime change happens, we're usually under stress. It could be management behavior, the type of work that you do. So it doesn't even have to be the specifically painful situation, people yelling at you or anything like that. It could be that you're just assigned to a position that you don't enjoy. Maybe it's a menial task or something like that. And there's actually a reason for why many organizations nowadays they recognize that certain jobs require certain skills and certain personalities and individuals, and there's a growing market for autistic individuals for certain jobs that require attention to details. That would be very stressful to other individuals, but they are advantageously positioned to do those kind of things. So again, maybe you're stressed because you're in the wrong type of position. Interpersonal relationships, and this is why, all that harassment stuff that we mentioned last week is essential. Procrastination, time pressure is a big one. Um, it could be positive for some individuals. So I know that I work a lot better when I have a deadline that's getting closer. But for many individuals, time pressure is not a good thing. And finally, smartphones, right? So they do distract. They do introduce other information into our lives when we are busy with other things. They disrupt our thinking patterns. So you definitely want to try to avoid them while working on important things as much as possible. And there are different tools you can employ to deal with stress. Time management is a very essential one. Relaxation, good sleep, exercise is absolutely essential. And so this is why this whole coronavirus situation is potentially problematic. It doesn't allow people to regularly exercise in the settings that they used to. And there's enough research out there that shows that um, carefully planned and very consistent exercise routine is the only thing that is guaranteed to increase your level of happiness, right? So exercise is definitely essential. Positive thinking, support network, right? We all face our trouble. It helps tremendously if there are some individuals you may call to discuss the situation, to vent your frustrations. So that definitely is helpful. Good nutrition is essential. So no fast food and cut back on smartphone checking. Right? So it's kind of self-explanatory. It should be fairly easy to, I guess, um, understand why that's essential. But for many of us, it's pretty hard to do. So I encourage you to actually start doing that. And with that, I'm going to end the session. I will be posting other things this week, and I will share that Briggs Myers personality inventory with you. So I encourage you to look at that stuff closely and to figure out what it means for you personally. Thank you, and I'll see you later.